Welcome to the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show. This is our 197th episode on May 23rd, 2024. My name is Andy Z.
And I'm Annie Day.
This is a show about revolution. This is a show for revolution. This is a show about the whole world. And it is a show for a radically new world.
We base ourselves on the revolutionary leadership of Bob Avakian, who's brought forward a new communism, a framework to emancipate all humanity. And we're going to hear from Bob Avakian throughout today's show. In today's episode, we're going to show what's happening with the U.S.-Israeli genocide of the Palestinian people. We're going to talk about the student uprising to stop this genocide, the crossroads in this struggle, and what's needed now. We're also going to talk about the revolution that's needed to overthrow the system that's at the source of all of this. But first, and as part of that, we're going to hear from the revolutionary leader Bob Avakian directly. This is from a talk that he gave in 2012. It's a talk from which we take our name, from BA Speaks, Revolution, Nothing Less.
Let's go back to basics, to fundamentals. Stepping back and looking at the sweep of human history. Many empires have risen and fallen, with different peoples or nations, and in particular their ruling classes, dominating and plundering others throughout thousands of years of human history in every part of the world. In ancient times, to mention just some empires, Greece, Rome, Persia, China, Egypt. In more recent times, the British Empire dominated much of the world in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. And now there is the empire of the USA and others seeking to challenge it. If it's not about anything different and better than that, if it's just about shuffling things around this way and that, but keeping in effect the relations in which some people rule over, oppress, and degrade whole other groups of people, while humanity as a whole is shrouded in ignorance and devastated by war, and the earth is plundered and ruined, if it's just about some people improving their position within this horrific system, or it's about some groups that have been down for a while having their chance to be up and to have their turn at lording it over others, then I am not interested. And neither should you be interested. We have to fight oppression under the system in the different ways it comes down on people. But our fundamental goal has to be to get beyond all this, or the horror will just keep going on, and the great majority of humanity will suffer terribly and needlessly, unless and until whoever is on top ruins and destroys things, including the environment, so completely that it's all over for everybody. But once again, the point is that in a way that was not true in previous periods in human history, there is the possibility to get beyond all that and to a much better place for humanity. But for that to happen, there has to be a growing core of people with a basic understanding of this and a firm commitment to actually fight for it. A firm commitment to be emancipators of humanity.
Hey, hey, whoa, whoa, the occupation has got to go!
and we really wanted to highlight that there are no graduations going on in Gaza right now because there's a genocide happening there. And so there's no business as usual during a genocide. We walked out of our graduation ceremony.
The last 5 weeks have seen a major uprising of students against the U.S.-Israeli genocidal slaughter of Palestinian people. An uprising that has the potential to mark a whole generation. But this struggle is now at a crossroads. The horror in Gaza continues, and there have continued to be brave and creative protests. But there are big questions about how to carry this forward, how to spread this resistance from the campuses into every corner of society, defending those under attack, how to understand what's driving this nightmare and what it will take to end it. Let's go back to where this started, with resistance in the face of repression that spread like wildfire. In mid-April, Columbia University President Nemat Minouche-Shafik groveled before a congressional hearing aimed at slandering all the protests against this genocide as anti-Semitic.
You don't think there's evidence of anti-Semitism among professors on your faculty?
We have seen some cases, and there have been consequences.
Columbia students answered by escalating their protests in the face of this promised repression. They started a Gaza solidarity encampment, and when Shafik moved to send the police onto campus, arresting over 100 people, students came back with a second encampment that very same day. And this set off a wave of campus resistance not seen in generations. Gaza solidarity encampments spread across the country and around the world. This reached and it gave hope to the people in Gaza, starving and under assault.
We appreciate it very much. We truly love them. Anyone who raises a flag for Palestine, we appreciate it with all our hearts. They are leaving their education. They are getting harmed. They're getting in trouble for us. We really appreciate it. We really want them to keep going. And we really want to be a part of these universities because they have stand with us. No one did that.
And it has caused millions to confront what is happening and to ask themselves what side they will stand on. The students have been met with mass arrests of over 3,000 people, slander, suspensions, and vicious brutality by police and by Zionist and fascist thugs. Students have continued to stand up, putting their futures and putting their bodies on the line, with this pouring into college graduations. At Columbia's School of Social Work graduation, one student tore up her degree on stage, while other students came up with their hands zip-tied together or with tape over their mouths. At Barnard College, graduates wore red poppies on their gowns with the names of the slain Palestinian children, and they turned their backs on the college president and dean as they spoke, while a Parents for Palestine banner was hung from the balcony. At Emerson College in Boston, 1/5 of the graduating class walked up for their degrees with fists in the air, many opening their gowns to reveal Palestinian flags. Students refused to shake the hand of the university president because of a police raid in which 100 people were arrested. At Yale, hundreds of students walked out of the graduation ceremony. For campuses that are still in session, the protests that have continued have been met with brutal repression. There were suspensions and then a massive show of police force and 47 arrests at UC Irvine after students occupied a building. In the early hours of May 16th, hundreds of police in riot gear stormed and dismantled the encampment at DePaul University in Chicago. 2 students were arrested and several injured. Just this week at the University of Michigan, police violently raided the encampment, pepper spraying people right in the eyes, hospitalizing 3 people and arresting 4, with the school threatening felony charges. Toward the beginning of this upsurge, the revolutionary leader Bob Avakian answered the question, why is this repression coming down so harshly on the students, especially at elite colleges? Listen to his answer.
Why is this happening? Because fundamental interests of U.S. capitalism and imperialism are at stake. Because Israel plays a special role as a heavily armed bastion of support for U.S. imperialism in a strategically important part of the world, the Middle East. and Israel has been a key force in the commission of atrocities which have helped to maintain the oppressive rule of U.S. imperialism in many other parts of the world. And this repression is happening because representatives of the ruling class in this country have a definite sense that if youth, especially at elite universities, begin to seriously question and act against what this system is doing, if the system loses the allegiance of large numbers of those students, that can be a big factor in creating a real crisis for the system as a whole, as happened in the 1960s. A crisis that now more than ever, this system really cannot afford when the whole country is already being torn apart by deep divisions with bitter clashes right among the ruling powers. So, at the same time as they are bitterly divided, the ruling powers of this country are firmly united in their determination to punish and intimidate, especially students at elite universities who have stepped forward to protest the genocidal slaughter of Palestinians. The ruling class is desperate to prevent opposition to its fundamental interests from spreading and involving masses of people from all parts of society. All this reveals more nakedly than in normal situations the actual dictatorship behind the outer shell of democracy of this country. And it shines a light on the strategic weakness of this system when it does lose the allegiance of major sections of the people. And this has the potential to spread to all parts of society, including among the dominant institutions of this system.
Think about what B.A. said. Fundamental interests of U.S. capitalism imperialism are at stake. As I said, there are big questions now about how to go forward. The Revcom Corps for the Emancipation of Humanity just issued an open letter speaking to those questions, addressed to those who have stood up. It says that the struggle to stop the U.S.-Israeli genocide of Palestinians is at a crossroads. We need to be serious about stopping the horrific genocide now unfolding and advancing the fight to win full liberation. This means right now working to make the fear of the rulers come true, working to deepen and widen their loss of legitimacy in the eyes of millions by drawing ever more people into this struggle against the genocide. This requires uniting all who can be united, everyone who can be won to declare, "Stop the U.S.-Israeli genocide of Palestinians now," should be welcomed in this movement. And this needs to go on while opening up the discussion and the debate about what is driving this genocide and what is necessary to end it. The letter invites people to get seriously with the Revcoms, to dig into what Bob Avakian is saying about how this genocide of the Palestinian people, how all oppression and exploitation is rooted in this system of capitalism imperialism, and how it can be ended through making revolution to overthrow this system, bringing into being a radically different and a far better system, putting an end to genocidal terror and wars once and for all. Another world is possible, and it's on all of us to make it real.
Next on today's program, we have Alan Goodman, who writes for Revcom.us on the situation in Gaza and in Israel. And he's been providing important weekly bulletins on the U.S.-funded and armed Israeli genocide in Gaza. This genocide is now in its 7th month. And not only is this almost an unspeakable terror and murder of the Palestinian people, but it has become a major factor in ripping the mask off of U.S. imperialism and its client police dog in the Mideast, the State of Israel. So I want to welcome Alan to the show. And I just want to say, Alan, your segments have been very important, and people really need to be following what has actually happened there. So once again, glad to have you back on the show, Alan.
Well, thanks. I appreciate what you just said, because in the whole 7 months that I've been following the situation, this is the worst things have been. Gaza has been pushed off the front page of the newspapers. A lot of people are kind of settled into, well, it's a terrible situation. But again, I'm making the case in my articles, and I'm going to make it here, that a really dangerous escalation is taking shape right now. And I'm going to pose, and I know you're posing, if this is true, then all of us, especially those of us here in the belly of the beast that enables and needs Israel, have to confront and respond to that reality. So I really appreciate the chance to connect that as best I can with your audience.
Well, okay, Alan. So look, this part of the story is that Israel has created a famine in Gaza that's reaching catastrophic proportions. But as you just said, in much of the U.S. media, the story is buried, if mentioned at all. Could you describe the situation now and how this depravity on the part of Israel is taking shape?
Well, the short answer is people are starving to death in a horrible, horrible way. Mothers don't have enough nutritional intake to produce milk to feed their babies. Any attempt to get in aid has been completely shut off now. Just to put things briefly in perspective, it took 500 truckloads of aid to keep people from starving to death before October 7th. Last week, 30 trucks a day trickled in. People do not have water to drink. Israel systematically destroyed the well water sources that people were drinking. Now they're drinking water from whatever source they can get. The disease is spreading. There's no sanitation. Throughout Gaza, children are wasting away. It's so, when you look at the pictures of children just shriveled up, and there have been famines in other parts of the world where the system turned its back on people. But this is a man-made famine. This is a genocidal famine. This is a famine that's been imposed on purpose by Israel, knowing exactly what's going on, that they are starving the Palestinian people to death. And people are watching their children waste away. They're watching elderly people dying. And again, this is an imposed genocidal famine.
Yeah, and also, when we were talking before, you were mentioning how Israel has also systematically destroyed any agricultural capacity within the Gaza Strip where there was farming and there were bakeries. All of these food supplies have been cut off. But let me ask you this, Ellen. What action has the U.S. taken to stop this? What has Genocide Joe Biden and his blinkered secretary, Anthony Blinken, Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, done as he shuttles back and forth to Israel? What have they done to actually stop this?
They haven't done anything to stop it. The short answer to what their response is that they have just sent another $1 billion worth of death machinery to impose death from the sky, missiles, tanks. I think we'll get into this a little later if we talk about the Netzarim corridor that Israel has built. And the United States has and Biden and Blinken have provided diplomatic cover for Israel. When reports emerged that the International Court of Justice might bring some of the Israeli leaders to trial for genocide, Biden denounced that as outrageous. It's not outrageous. It's a fact. And everywhere that there's public outrage, Biden is quick to say, oh, this is not a genocide. What do you call systematically starving a whole people to death? If that's not genocide, what is?
Yeah, I think this is an important point, Alan. And you know, there's complicity here for people living in this country. And I want to just play a brief social media post of some people who did something right in the face of Anthony Blinken. Watch this.
China.
He's a war criminal. He is a war criminal. The blood of 40,000 people is on his hands. The blood of 40,000 Palestinians is on his hands. He is a war criminal. He is a war criminal. Blinken is a war criminal.
Pursuing
Russia was 6 years old when Israelis killed her. His Russia was 6 years old. Blinken, you will be remembered as the butcher of Gaza. You will be remembered for murdering innocent Palestinians.
Alan, I just got to take a minute to talk about this Secretary Anthony Blinken. Last week, in addition to what he's doing, the war crime that's being committed, the crime against humanity that's being committed in Israel, last week he goes to Ukraine, where the U.S. is waging a proxy war using Ukraine's soldiers and the people with Russia, a war that's reaching some very dangerous places right now, but that's beyond what we want to talk about today. But what does Blinken do there? He goes into a club at night, takes out his electric guitar to play a song by Neil Young called Rockin' in the Free World. This was a protest song written by Neil Young against President then Herbert Walker Bush in the 1990s, where Neil Young was talking about the reality of homeless people and how people are suffering in the U.S. and what the ruling class in this country is about. I'll just give you the lyrics of the first verse because it wasn't in the clip we just saw. It says this, Neil Young wrote this: "There's colors on the street, red, white, and blue, people shuffling their feet, people sleeping in their shoes, but there's a warning sign on the road ahead. There's a lot of people saying we'd be better off dead. Don't feel like Satan, but I am to them." So, all right, let's go back to our interview here, but I just had to say that I almost couldn't believe it. Look, you mentioned this earlier, Alan. In the past week, there's been reporting on the Netzarim corridor that Israel has created, as well as the creation of a buffer zone. This is important to get into. It reveals much about the genocide, and it indicates the Israeli-U.S. future intentions.
Yeah, well, you're right. And I want to get into this from a couple dimensions. One is what went into this. So what we're talking about is northern Gaza is very narrow. It's only 4 miles wide. And Israel has taken a big strip of Gaza that is a section just south of Gaza City, basically cutting Gaza in two. And this strip is heavily militarized. We'll get into that in a moment and what's the ominous agenda behind that militarization. But just to give people a feel for what went into clearing this strip tells you so much about Israel's genocidal agenda and how this is not a war between Israel and Hamas, as much as that's a dimension of it. It's fundamentally a genocidal massacre and a whole genocidal agenda against the Palestinian people. To make this corridor that runs 4 miles completely seals northern Gaza from southern Gaza, to make that 1,000 buildings were bulldozed and blown up. Farmhouses. We were talking about destroying the ability of people in Gaza to eat. And one of the buildings that was seized was the campus of Israel University. This university included a law school. It housed an institution called the Palestinian Center for the Independence of the Judiciary and the Legal Profession. On January 17th, Israel blew up that university. The university administration put out a statement charging that before blowing up their campus, Israeli troops operated out of the university and used it as a base for snipers shooting civilians, as well as a detention center where Israel was torturing seized Palestinians. Israel looted artifacts. This is the multidimensional genocide going on here. Looted artifacts, and the administration made the point that by systematically destroying, I mean literally destroying, Gaza's higher education capacity, it was a way for Israel to force all Palestinian professionals who are being trained in law, medicine, and so on to go to Europe or some other place to practice their profession. And this then fits into the whole depopulation and crushing of the Palestinian culture, community, education, and so on. One other thing, really got to mention this. The corridor includes a building which housed the Turkish Palestinian Friendship Hospital, which specialized in cancer treatment. That hospital was completely and violently shut down by Israel, including by depriving it of fuel. Thousands of cancer patients were abandoned without care. But wait, it gets even more depraved. Israel is using that hospital now as a sniper position to fire on Palestinian civilians. Now, let's just roll back the clock a minute. Al-Shifa Hospital was the largest hospital in Gaza City. That hospital was completely demolished. It is in ruins now. Hundreds of bodies of medical staff, patients, people seeking shelter were tossed by Israel into shallow graves outside the hospital. And what was the excuse for Israel doing that? You remember this, Andy. People have been following this. Israel said that underneath the hospital, you couldn't see it in the hospital, but underneath the hospital, in tunnels, Hamas was using the hospital as an operational command center. No evidence was ever produced, no meaningful evidence was ever produced that gave any credibility to that. And yet Israel destroyed the whole hospital. And now Israel has moved its troops into a seized hospital. They're not hiding in tunnels underneath it. They're up on the roof shooting people out of a hospital. And you'll find, if you don't believe me, go to Revcom.us and look at the photos we have up there of this.
This is what we've said, unspeakable, but it's actually really happening. And another aspect of this, Alan, which we've spoken about, and, we often use the word and the movement of the students in this country about the struggle in Palestine has been, and in Gaza has been, that this Israel is a apartheid state. And bisecting the Gaza Strip like this is yet building, and there's walls on either side of this corridor, is creating a smaller and smaller space through which an apartheid regime can control the population. This is really no different than the Native American reservations that the U.S. set up in the West. This is no different than the ghettos and the walls that were put around the ghettos in places like Warsaw, Poland, during World War II against the Jewish people. And that's one of the bitter ironies of all of this. So, Alan, do you have a last comment before we close out today's bulletin from you?
Just very briefly, the situation is the worst it's been. Most of the hospitals are shut down. People are starving. We discussed that. Israel is bombing and shooting up Jabalia refugee camp. stay tuned to Revcom.us and follow our coverage. But here's the thing. Our response here in the belly of the beast that's sending these bombs over to blow up hospitals and universities, we have to be in the streets. We have to be spreading the struggle. We have to measure what we do by what's going on over there.
Good point. All right, Alan, we'll see you next week.
Great.
To meet the challenge of stopping the genocide of the Palestinian people will require a broad, deep, and determined movement that is unignorable, a movement that goes deeply into what is the root cause of the genocide, the history and the system that drives this, and all the other crises that threaten the future, from the destruction of the environment to all the exploitation and oppression that torments and crushes people here and around the world. More, the solution to all of this is a real revolution to overthrow the capitalist imperialist system and replace it with a revolutionary socialist society to enable people to work and struggle together to emancipate all of humanity. Bob Avakian has qualitatively developed the scientific method and approach for that revolution in the new communism. Woven into this and sorely needed in the movements of today and the struggle ahead is a generosity of spirit and a largeness of mind. We want to play B.A. speaking about this from the interview that Sansara Taylor and I did with Bob Avakian on this show in the fall of 2022.
Yeah, well, I think largest of mind and generosity of spirit are closely connected. Largest of mind means that you are looking at things, in a broad perspective, not narrowly, but you're actually looking at things broadly and seeking. Also you're seeking the underlying causes of things, but also you want to, learn from and encompass a lot of different things coming from a lot of different sources. That's a very important part of largest of mind. Like we should be, the most, anxious to learn from any source that we can learn from. Even people who vehemently disagree with us, if there's something that we can learn from what they're saying, even if we have to disagree with 97% of it or more. So that largest of mind means the orientation of learning from broadly from many diverse sources, including people who do not agree with you. And that's very important, because it is true that even, as I've said, under socialism, even reactionaries should be allowed to publish some books. I said that before the Constitution was written, which institutionalizes that. But why is that? Because you can learn. I'll give you an example from my own experience. Zbigniew Brzezinski, who was an official, I think he was a defense secretary under Carter, if I'm not mistaken. And, he's a major functionary and thinker of the imperialists, wrote about the Russian Revolution, that the tradition of autocracy, and I'll explain that in a second, the tradition of autocracy in Russia seeped its way into the Bolsheviks, the communists, and that explains why they were repressive. Now, autocracy is a government that, that doesn't allow people rights, that rules by absolute authority and so on and so forth. And he said, this tradition, what was he talking about? In Russia, they had a whole tradition of absolute monarchs, the czars, whose power was unquestioned for a long time. They were the absolute and ultimate authority in society. So that was a tradition of autocracy, so to speak. And that's what Brzezinski was talking about. So he wrote this thing and he said, this applied to the Russian Revolution. This tradition, and deeply seated in Russian society, also influenced the Bolsheviks and led them to be repressive. And I wrote and I said, this is a bunch of bullshit, because the Bolshevik Revolution was against everything that the autocracy, the czars, and every oppressive and exploitative relation in society. So this is complete bullshit. So then I thought about it for a while, and I said, well, actually, it's not complete bullshit. So when you think about it, there's probably some truth to that, like Mao said about Stalin, that one of Stalin's problems methodologically was he was raised in a religious seminary where he was taught to think in the kind of absolute wooden terms that religion trains you to think. And he said this carried over into the way he led the communist movement and the socialist society. And he upheld Stalin overall, but he said this was a serious problem with Stalin.
So similarly, we could say in the Russian Revolution, there was undoubtedly influence of the character of that society, even on the people who were, to use these terms, negating that society, overthrowing it and transforming and replacing it. There was still some influence there. So then, after thinking about it, I wrote something, followed up, and said, well, he has something of a point. So this is an example where you can learn, and you have to be willing to learn from people who, look, we're completely on the opposite side of everything, and when it comes down to it, we'll be on the opposite side of the barricades, so to speak, from the Brzezinskis of the world. But that doesn't mean that you can't learn anything from them, and that's why I said even reactionaries should be allowed to write books in socialist society, because they may point out some things about what we're doing that we would actually want to understand are bad, even though where they're coming from is trying to get rid of what we're seeking to do. You see what I'm saying? So that has to do with largeness of mind. Now, generosity of spirit is closely connected to that, but also involves the whole point we've been talking about. What is this revolution for? It's not for revenge. Mm-hmm. It's not just to tear down other people in order to climb over them. That's what Lenin meant when he said, everyone who makes revolution from the standpoint of they had their chance, now it's my turn to have a go, does it from the point of view of the petty bourgeoisie. And what he meant is it's characteristic of the petty bourgeoisie. They feel squeezed. They want to climb over others to get a better position. So that's not what this revolution is about. It's not about climbing over others. It's not about taking revenge. Even when people have done terrible things, it's not about taking revenge on people. If people have committed terrible crimes, and the Constitution for the New Socialist Republic in North America institutionalizes this, there are legal means in which they should be tried and, if convicted, punished for the crimes that they've committed, including crimes against humanity and war crimes and the rest of it. But it's not a matter of individuals taking revenge. If we go down that road, it's the same problem I was just speaking to. Then you get back to the ends justify the means. Any means are justified because of what we suffered. And let's be honest. When you talk about how we got to struggle with masses of people, this is going to be one of the sharpest focus of struggle, especially with people who have been so badly fucked over under the present system, including by people who do have a little bit better position than them. I mean, this is one thing also, going way back to the woke thing. What should our focus be on, micro or macro? You see, macro means the large picture. Micro means the smallest picture. A lot of these people are focused on all the microaggressions. Okay, nobody should put up with people being racist toward them or, patriarchal toward them, misogynist. Nobody should put up with that in their personal relations. But where is your eye focused? It should be focused on the big macro, the big picture of what's going on to masses of people. That should be where your orientation and your focus is. On the thousands of people that are, the 1,000 people who are murdered every year by the police, a disproportionate number of black, brown, and Native American, many of them unarmed. The millions of people who are mass incarcerated, the people who are discriminated against, segregated, denied any kind of a decent life, forced to live in poverty or even homeless, the women who are subjected to battering and rape and all the rest of it. Those are the bigger things that our attention should be focused on in terms of uprooting all of this. And yes, with it, we'll transform these microaggressions too. But our focus has to be on the big picture. The macro means big, the big picture. So this is also very important. What was I saying before? Generosity of spirit. Okay, Let's get back to that. Well, you can see how this figures in here. What is this revolution about? Why should we have generosity of spirit? Because we're emancipators of humanity. We're not about, settling scores. We're not about, ripping into people for things they've done wrong. If they've done wrong, they need to be held accountable, but we also need to struggle to transform people. That's what this revolution is about. And the generosity of spirit flows from that. If you understand that we're seeking to uproot, it both flows from it and is necessary to reinforce it. But let me put it that way. If you understand that what we're out to do is to uproot all this exploitation and oppression, then you should have a largeness of mind, including learning from everything you can learn and everyone you can learn from, but also a generosity of spirit, recognizing that people, contrary to what's often said these days, people can and do change. I can sit here and give you examples of multiple people that I know, including myself for that matter, but other people I know from the 60s and so on and since, who've undergone major transformation, major changes, people who are into really bad shit, you know, or supporting really bad things, people who were Goldwater supporters back in the 1960s who became radicals and revolutionaries through the course of the 60s, soldiers who, you know, in Vietnam committed terrible atrocities, as I've said before. You know, go down the line. People can transform. And one of the dimensions of generosity of spirit is recognizing that. And then, okay, it's perfectly consistent with that, and in fact, an expression of it, that you're going to struggle like hell with people to get them to transform, exactly because you do recognize that they can and that they need to. You're not going to be liberal. It doesn't do any good to be liberal with people. People don't need any more social workers. You know, I'm not saying all social workers do bad things, just to be clear, but that's not what communists need to be. That's not what people recognize the need for overturning this whole system, uprooting it, and bringing a different system into being. Don't need to be, you know, don't need to be just, you know, giving people some kind of solace or something, or, you know, being liberal with them. When people talk bullshit, they should be told they're talking bullshit because it's harmful. It's harmful to them, but it's harmful to much, much greater numbers of people when people are caught up in bullshit. So why should we hesitate to struggle with people? If you have respect for people, you will struggle with them. It's a lack of respect for people if you don't struggle with them when you know they're doing things that are fucked up. If you really respect people and understand the potential for them to change, you will struggle like hell with people. And we can all sit here and know that we've all been struggled with. You know, by people, you know, who at the time had a better, you know, were coming from a better place than us. You go back to anybody's history. You land, you know, you get where you are now to being an emancipator of humanity. You weren't born that way, and you didn't spontaneously go that way. People fought with you, people struggled with you, and you learned from them. So, you know, to me, it's the highest respect for people if you struggle, not if you just try to tear them down. You know, not if all you're concerned is like proving that you're superior to them or that they're just worthless and irredeemable and all this kind of bullshit. But if you actually understand that they can and must change, then you have enough respect for them to struggle like hell with them, to actually act in their own interests and the interests of the broad mass of people and ultimately all humanity. So you're going to struggle like hell with them for that.
What's up, everyone? This is Rafael. I'm out here at UCLA today. As you can see, there is a protest happening behind me, a pro-Palestine protest. Actually, a student walkout that was called because tomorrow the president of this university, Gene Black, he's actually being called before the congressional so-called anti-Semitism hearings that have been happening for months now. This is happening tomorrow. He's going to be testifying at that. You know, and this is one of the big lies that's been used to demonize this movement and justify the suppression on these college campuses of protesters, basically saying that all these, you know, student encampments are full of anti-Semitism. Biden's running this out. These fascists in Congress are running it out. It's fucking bullshit. Anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitism. Opposing Israel, criticizing Israel, trying to stop a genocide is not attacking the Jewish people as a whole. So, but I'm also here today because I want to let everyone know that the Revcoms, myself included, Sansara Taylor, others, are going to the National Conference on Palestine happening in Detroit this weekend. This is a really important opportunity to get together with others, to discuss strategies, to brainstorm, to make connections. And this is happening in a moment where, the struggle for Palestinian liberation, the struggle to stop this genocide is at a crossroads. The genocide is escalating. They've invaded Rafah. They've cut the Gaza Strip in half with a road. They're bombing Gaza City. They're attacking Jenin in the West Bank. They're slaughtering people all over Gaza right now as we speak with USA bombs, weapons, missiles, artillery, bullets. And, it's really important, at this moment that we not just comfort ourselves with the idea that, we just have to keep the resistance going. We're almost at victory. No, these Zionists, fully backed by the United States, are right now aiming to totally ethnically cleanse the Gaza Strip, to establish a permanent Israeli presence there, to carry out what amounts to a final solution of their so-called Palestinian problem. So it's really important that we get together and we actually be strategic and we actually think through what's it really going to take to stop this genocide. And even more than that, what's it going to take to stop, genocides and ethnic cleansing and wars and occupations for empire that have been going on, for a long time. And the Palestinian people have been resisting this for over 100 years. But we really got to ask ourselves, what's it going to take to put a stop to this, to uproot the system that is at the root of it, capitalism, imperialism, once and for all, and that is going to take a revolution based on the new communism. So we're going to this conference trying to strengthen the resistance against this genocide, to unite everyone who can be united, to go out all summer long and spread this resistance far and wide in the communities of the oppressed everywhere, and at the same time, we want to open up a discussion, a debate, a conversation, and win as many people as we can to our understanding of what really is at the root of this, the system of capitalism, imperialism, and the only fundamental solution to what the Palestinian people face, what the people in Haiti and the Congo and the people who are oppressed right here in this country are facing, which is, the system of capitalism, imperialism, and the only solution to that, a real revolution. So a group of Revcoms with the Revcom Corps for the Emancipation of Humanity are going to this conference in Detroit this weekend, and we're going from all over the country. We're bringing, a whole bunch of materials, flyers, pamphlets, the compendium from the Avakian Institute with Avakian's writings on Palestine and Israel and the revolution we need. We have t-shirts, we have stickers to get out. All this costs a lot of money, plane tickets, bus fares, gas for the cars, food, all this. So if you want this message of spreading and strengthening the resistance, this message of revolution to get to the root of what people are confronting, if you want this to spread at this conference, at this critical moment in history, to the thousands of people that are going to be at this conference, people from the Palestinian diaspora and people who give a damn about the suffering of the Palestinian people, to get this message out to the thousands of people in Detroit this weekend, make a donation, whatever you can, as much as you can. Dig deeply. We are trying to raise thousands of dollars for this conference. So donate. The link will be in the description of the video here.
Free, free, free Palestine!
Free, free, free Palestine!
Free, free humanity!
Free, free humanity!
Revolution's what we need!
Revolution's what we need!
Revolution!
All right, so that brings us, Annie, to the end of this, the 197th episode of the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show.
Very good to be with you, Andy. Very good to be with you all tonight. Make sure you're following at the Revcoms on social media, at Bob Avakian Official. Get plugged into this movement for revolution for real.
And subscribe to the RNL show and become a Patreon. And we're going to see you, as always, on next Thursday night. The show premieres at 5 p.m. Pacific Time, 7 p.m. Central Time, and 8 p.m. Eastern Time. So, good night.
See you next week.